So Lee Selby becomes the latest of a growing list of fighters, UK fighters, to sign with American boxing advisor Al Haymon. Now, if Eddie Hearn is not concerned about the amount of, or the number of his fighters that are starting to sign with Uncle Al, then Eddie is not as smart as I thought he was. He must be kind of looking over his shoulder a little bit here and saying to himself, hang on, I've seen this before. Isn't this what happened with Oscar De La Hoya? When Al Haymon came in like a friend of Golden Boy and said, oh, it's no problem. I'm just going to sign all your fighters to me as an advisor. You know, I'm not their promoter. No problem here. Nothing to worry about. And then, of course, we know what happened after that. Could this be Al Haymon making a serious incursion into the UK boxing market in terms of is that his long-term strategy to do that? Because with all these fighters he's signing, could he then just say, you know what, ITV, I'm going to do the same thing in the UK that I did in America. I'm going to buy a bunch of airtime off you for a set amount of money, and then I'm going to put all these big UK fights on terrestrial TV with no pay-per-view involved. You could do that in the UK, potentially, if he keeps on signing fighters. And obviously that's going to be a big problem for Eddie Hearn, unless he somehow gets in on that act with Al Haymon. But that's unlikely because Eddie Hearn is signed to Sky Sports. He's got a deal with Sky Sports for the next 5 years, I believe, 5 or 6 years. So that's unlikely to happen. So if Haymon did do that in the next couple years, it's going to be direct competition for Eddie Hearn, and competition that he really wouldn't be able to compete with. Neither him or Frank Warren could compete with it. If he's going to, copy the same model from the US with the PBC situation in the UK, nobody would be able to compete with that. It would effectively destroy the other promoters, at least the major promoters in terms of Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. It would destroy them. So Lee Selby's the latest guy to sign with Uncle Al. Does this mean that, actually, Eddie Hearn was talking the other day about how, in an interview, I think it was with IFL TV, about how he now has to deal with the De Gale team. He no longer is going to be able to, at least according to the interview I saw, deal with De Gale directly. He'll have to go through Al Haymon. And that seems to be, I'm assuming it's going to be the same situation with Lee Selby. He's going to have to go through Al Haymon to talk to Lee Selby. And now, does this mean that Lee Selby is going to be fighting in the States now? Why has Lee Selby done this? Is there a particular fight he's looking to get by signing with Al Haymon? Or is it just for a long-term business situation? Maybe Al Haymon has promised him the world. One thing I will say is that if you look at Kell Brook, for example, and I'll do another video on this, he seems to be struggling to get a big fight. And a lot of that, in my opinion, seems to be down to the shortcomings of Eddie Hearn. You know, a lot of you may have different opinions on that, but my personal opinion is that the shortcomings of Eddie Hearn as a promoter, and Eddie Hearn's done a good job, but there are challenges along the road as a promoter which you have to meet, and you have to, hurdles you have to get over, because the boxing landscape is constantly changing. Can Eddie Hearn adapt to the way it's changing at the moment? He's come in for a lot of flack and a lot of criticism over his constant pushing of pay-per-view for fights which are not really pay-per-view worthy. And that's creating a lot of discontent among the British boxing public. And maybe it's creating some discontent among some of Eddie Hearn's fighters, because that model that he has maybe doesn't work for creating the fights that he wants to make. I don't know. I'm just me, musing about certain things here. So it's interesting to see Lee Selby now signed with Al Haymon. It's a trend, like I say, that Eddie Hearn has to be worried about. Who's going to be the next fighter? Some people are saying that it's possibly Kell Brook or Anthony Joshua. That would really be significant. That would really get Eddie Hearn worried if Kell Brook or Anthony Joshua signed with Uncle Al. But drop your comments below. Let me know how you feel about the situation. It's happening. I'm out.